Today we have three of the team behind Comedy Central's The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. We have showrunner and executive producer Jen Flans. We have supervising producers and Jubin Parang and David Kabuka. Before we get to them, we're going to see a clip of Trevor in action.
Just in case it wasn't clear, Trump is saying that he's going to stop black people from moving into white people's neighborhood. I mean, it's not even subtle enough to call that a dog whistle. It's too loud. It's more like a dog steel drum. I won't let the black people live near you. This is an absurd suggestion, I know. We can't reschedule the election. For starters, both candidates are like 200 years old. I mean, we've got to keep things moving. I'm not even sure that Trump understands what an alarming proposal this is, because this is basically the move of a dictator. But Trump is just casually throwing it out there in a tweet with a bunch of question marks, like he's on a group text trying to bail on happy hour. Hey y'all, November 3rd is not great for me. Maybe we reschedule for 2021. Thoughts? We have so much more work to do. Because what happened to Breonna Taylor, it's not just a few bad cops. It's not even really just about the cops. It's also the legislature that gave them the power to break into houses, the judge that signed the warrant, the police department that didn't act against these officers, and the county that charged the protesters for challenging these rules. In other words, what happened to Breonna Taylor wasn't a failure of the system. It was the system working as it's intended. And that is why people are fighting for the system to be changed.
Thanks for joining us, guys. So look, Jen, let me start with, we spoke back in April, about a month into the pandemic, and you told me that the show was in some ways built for this. How are we feeling 5 months in about that?
I feel like we did have a great foundation starting off. I could not have imagined it would be this long, but I think it's still, we were kind of built for it. We're like a ragtag bunch, and we do a lot of online content. We know how to crank stuff out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter if we're in the studio or not. And I would have formerly said that we just do that online, but we figured out how to do it on linear too. So I'm pretty proud of everybody. They did a good job.
Has it been normal yet?
Does it feel normal? Yeah. This is now like normal for us, I would say. We're pretty.
Boy, that's very depressing to think of. But yeah, it kind of does. It definitely feels a little bit like I'm now kind of like in a routine that feels like this will be kind of long term. So it feels in a very depressing way, kind of like normal now.
Yeah, it's like not normal. Like none of us want this to be normal. But yeah. I'd say it becomes, like Jubin said, it's become a routine. We know it now. We know how to do it. We really keep refining the system.
In many ways, I've forgotten what Trevor looked like in the studio. We've got you so used to seeing him from his home. As you say, there's a sort of routine in watching. Talk to me about that process, things over those 5 months. Obviously, in that first few weeks, you were getting this up and running and going ahead. But the show feels like it's found a rhythm with Trevor. Could you discuss that?
It's difficult to, it's a different type of writing, and we had to adjust to it. But I think we did a fairly good job clicking in pretty quickly about what jokes work in an audience setting and what jokes don't work in an audience setting. And we took advantage, I think, of the freedom that not having an audience there live affords you. You can be better, you can take advantage of editing more, of adding interesting graphics and fun, even sound effects. You can adopt more of a YouTube style to the writing that relies on cuts and punches for effect, which is, it's not necessarily better than the in studio audience, but it's a new muscle to work. And I think probably honestly that's been the most fun of the last few months is learning how to work that muscle.
Yeah. I mean, our editing team has been phenomenal. They're just like,
absolutely. They will add layers to a joke that makes joke. They'll make jokes that aren't as funnier. By the way they edit. We're very lucky to have them.
You're making like a mixed movie every day because there's no live studio audience with a movie.
Yeah.
Like that kind of humor.
Yeah.
Are there certain types of jokes that you can tell that perhaps you might not have been able to tell before because they might not have got a laugh in the audience, but you know, they're funny on one level.
Yes, definitely. You can tell jokes that are sometimes a bit darker than you would otherwise, just because you're not worried about the audience tightening up and feeling more upset than joyous at the joke. But if a joke is strong, then we can feel free to move forward with that joke when we couldn't before. We can also take advantage of having a bit more fun with act outs and with elongating jokes more, because we can rely on tight editing to get through the joke faster than with an audience which would be laughing at every beat and would slow the joke down. So those are kind of jokes you can't really tell in front of a live audience, you know, because it's more of a theater. More of the jokes rely more on the kind of theatrical style than with a, you know, modern day sitcom rapid fire style. So those are the kind of jokes we can tell a little bit better.
The one thing that you take for granted when it comes to a live studio audience is how they take on, like, if they don't like one joke, they can sink the whole act, or they can sink the
yeah. That's what I was going to say. You could lose them for the whole show if you lose them over one joke. So you really have to be careful of the jokes you tell.
On that level, we actually had a joke that I really liked a couple of months ago, where Trevor was talking to the camera, and he said, you know, you don't have to, it is in the height of the quarantine, and he said, you don't have to leave your house when you can just use your imagination. And then we cut to him in the shower saying, I'm in the shower. And we cut back. And that's the kind of joke we couldn't do in the studio audience. It just wouldn't work with them there. And that's a kind of really fun, quick cuts and back that really we're taking advantage of, and I really like.
Yeah. I feel like
basically the home audience has low standards.
Yeah, exactly. They'll laugh at that.
They are letting us get away with a lot.
Yeah.
The home audience, I would say. There is nothing that can replace like the excitement of taping in front of a live audience. That is just like, but in, you know, a world where you can't do that, I think we figured out like a fun way to do the show. And for those of us who've been doing it a while with Trevor, this is just like a new, I think we're a glass half full team here, and it's like it's great to try something new in a world where you can't do the old thing.
And Trevor's almost creating sort of new characters, or certainly new characters played by himself. I'm not sure if that's a sign of the pandemic.
Yeah, he does a lot of voices even when we're in the studio, but he'll do them. Usually he'll do one voice to the audience, and now we sometimes have him do two voices to, like he's having a conversation with two people, which is fun. That's a new thing.
And for people out there who are not well versed in television, the reason why editing is so important is because some of the things are incredibly difficult to do in, like, timing wise in front of a live studio audience. Like, he wouldn't be able to do the act out he does live because the timing would just be completely wrong. And so the editors have really made the show a wonderful thing to watch.
Yeah.
At the top of this pandemic, not only did you have to figure out how to make the show from home, but you extended the show from 30 minutes to 45 minutes.
What?
No one told him. No, it was, you know, initially it was a little bit selfish. We were doing it because it made the editing at the end of the night easier. We had so much good content. And once you have to start going back in and chopping, it takes time. And we were running up against the clock and getting very close to not feeding out a few nights. We were like, you know, if we had a little more time, and the place that you really see it is in the guest segments, because when we're in the studio, we would tape a guest segment, maybe 15 minutes, and only 5 minutes of it would air. And then we'd put the long version online in the episode on, you know, thedailyshow.com and the app. So the long version would always get out there. In the way we're set up now, feeding out two versions of the interview is just too hard. We don't have the time to do it. So it was like, how can you have guests on like Dr. Fauci and Governor Cuomo and Hillary Clinton and make them 5 minutes? It's like, and also like all these, you know, authors and activists and people that Trevor are talking to, they're having these really in-depth conversations about important things to the world right now. You know, there's a lot, like Gabby Union came on, right? We were the first show she did to talk about America's Got Talent. And those, they're like, interviews that you really can't just cut up and act like it, it was a 4-minute conversation. So a lot of the time is going into the interview, but also there's just so much to talk about that we didn't feel like we could cut it out of the, headlines either. We're great. We wanted more time. We did it.
If when you cut it, it can be like, "Hello, how are you doing? My whole family died in a hurricane. Well, good night."
Yeah. They started to feel like that, so we asked for more time.
Yeah.
So there's more time.
But having said that, you've done that, and Trevor's even said this when we spoke to him for the last Contenders, that you did that without any pre-production, any planning, and very little scheduling. Sort of working through this. Did that almost make it, in a way, you were sort of jumping in blind? But I guess, given that we're all doing this somewhat blind, it made it any easier?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think this whole thing is blind. Like, we didn't. Like when we plan out like an election year, we talk about going to the conventions and we talk about our live shows and the debates we're going to cover, and we plan the year out based on like events that are going to come up. And then, you couldn't plan for this. So I would say, yes, this was very unplanned. But we're like a pretty close knit team, and we work well together, have a really good shorthand. So I think it helped pull it together pretty quickly.
Remember when you're saying about the planning, we had this big meeting for the conventions,
Yeah.
and I distinctly remember people debating accommodation for the Little did we know that your apartment was going to be.
I know. I'm like, well, we're not going to the conventions, but the conventions aren't even going to the conventions. It's really a very different. It's a very different election year than we're used to, because we used to have it's a highlight of the Daily Show cycles. Like, we really like going on the road together, and the conventions are such a rush because you're up late watching all the speeches together, and it's a really exciting time. But we're still going to stay up late and watch all the speeches together.
Well, I was
It just won't be from the city that they are in.
As you say, the Daily Show, one of the highlights of an election year for the Daily Show is those elections, the characters, the chaos, the craziness of that convention. I guess we'll get some of that, but in a very different form. I guess, as you say, the conventions aren't even going to the conventions, or to a certain extent, the conventions don't even know what the conventions will look like. So that makes it harder for you to plan what the convention coverage will be.
Yeah, the good thing is we have a few things that are planned that we get excited about. Once we figured out we weren't going to the conventions, so our correspondents, our news team is usually on the floor of the conventions, and those pieces are usually really great and funny. So we started thinking about how else can we cover the conventions in the field with our news team, because our news team is amazing and hilarious, and they really build out the show in a way so it's not just Trevor to camera the whole time. So we started thinking about that. So we have a few field pieces in the works based on issues that'll be going on at the conventions, and then we'll do our biofilms like we always do. We'll do a Trump biofilm and a Biden biofilm, and those are usually highlights of our coverage. So, and we hope to have some really great guests for everyone. So I think, it won't be our usual convention coverage, but we are going to figure out a way to cover them anyway.
I think the good thing about that too is, what we lose in the day-to-day hard news content of it, we can step back a little bit, and especially with the correspondents we have, we can talk more to what they think and what their point of view is about the larger issues surrounding not the conventions, but the election itself, the campaign issues. And we can lean more into their voices than we would ordinarily, where it'd be a lot of like, what footage can we get of whatever person we can get on the floor. So I think, it's always a thrill to write to the different correspondents and see what they bring to a segment, see what ideas they bring to the show and to Trevor. They have so many different points of view, and it's just it'll be more fun to lean into that over these next few months. And so I'm looking forward to actually that part of the convention.
Talking of the correspondents, given that they are a group that is either largely on the road or certainly outside and speaking to people, how, from your side, how has that process been? I can imagine a few of them going a little bit stir crazy and not being able to. Our field team has been doing an amazing job. I'm like, how do you have a field team when you can't go into the field? They really reimagined
what a field piece could be. And, you know, the correspondents and the producers and editors are all working together to create these really great interviews, you know, essentially, and whatever bits we could get together that we could shoot over Zoom. The correspondents have gotten very technically proficient. I know some of their spouses have had to get technically proficient to help shoot, but our field producers are like directing them on Zoom, and some of the field pieces we've done have been really insightful, and I think some of the field pieces have been some of my favorite that we've done. And we did have Jordan Klepper get to go out in the field recently, which was, he did a Trump rally that was on boats in New Jersey. And so we had to get everything, you know, past the COVID supervisor, and everybody was spread out and out in the open air. But it was so, it was like really beautiful to like see the outside on the show again.
Yeah.
Came back and we were all like, oh my God, this is so nice, you know. But that's our first out in the field.
Yeah.
Honestly, as long as if the rest of the campaign, if all the rallies and conventions just be on a series of boats on lakes, I think that would really work out better for everybody.
Yeah, it would definitely, especially if it was like in driving distance from New York.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So moving on from the correspondence, but I guess for Zubin and David, from the writing side of things, you mentioned in terms of the types of jokes, but obviously you have a writing team. How has that been? I imagine this is a group that, you know, is getting together and making up jokes together and spitballing and such. Talk through a little bit of that process in terms of how you heard those cats.
It's definitely hard. Like, it's not like, you know, part of the joy of being on a comedy show is being able to get together in a room with a bunch of funny people and just make jokes and make each other laugh. And you definitely lose something when you have to make these jokes over FaceTime or Zoom, and your sound cuts out in the middle of a joke, and you're like presenting the punchline, and they're like, I didn't hear that. What? You have to like repeat it, and the moment's gone. And that is, it's difficult to work around that. But we have gotten the system now where we communicate with the writers all throughout the day on specific jokes we need. The writers will pitch their jokes back. Occasionally, writers will take a script and go work on it together over Zoom, the same way they would do when they would be in the office together. It's just, you know, everything has to shift over to FaceTime. And yeah, I think we've done a very good job. I think that our writers have been presenting material that's as good or better as it's ever been. I think, you know, the fact that we got an Emmy nomination this year for writing, I think shows at least the Academy is recognizing that, and we're really grateful for that. But it's definitely it's a challenge. It might be the biggest bummer, I think, of COVID, that we can't have a big morning meeting where we all get in and check in and just make jokes with each other. One
thing that, as Yuman is saying, it's like it's completely different. One thing that I found interesting is when you work with writers, a lot of jokes come from bouncing off each other, and then you get the fully formed thing. And it's been interesting to see how various people need the bounce off each other, and various people can just give you the fully formed thing. It's almost like some people need like a partner to have a baby, and other people are like, no, I can have the baby by myself. I mean, like, I don't, I have, you know, like,
yeah, you mean raise a baby, but I like it more the idea of conceiving the baby as something that some people can just do by themselves.
I mean,
oh, you do mean that?
Yeah, here's a baby. I
yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
I like that.
Not
I just divide it on a cellular level.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Just find out who those people are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And you thought, you know, you're like, oh, this person can just make babies by themselves.
In the absence of like of that room, you find out also more writers. You hear the voices of the individual writers more in the absence of that adding on and refining together in a room, which is definitely interesting to see more than you usually do what writers' voices really are when they're just pitching jokes by themselves.
So, Jane, you were mentioning some of the guests that you've had on during the pandemic. Dr. Fauci early on in the spread, and you've had Joe Biden, and you've had Governor Cuomo. What is it, I guess, some of them are available, but you've managed to pull in some really big guests for this time. Talk me through that process, and is there anyone left that you'd really like on the show?
Yeah, we want both of the Obamas. You know, they're like, you know, very hard to get. They're busy people, but no, I mean, you know, there's a ton of people that we want that that range from like The Rock to, you know, Barack. There's tons of guests that we want to get on still. But we definitely have been, our 2 talent producers are amazing, and they've just been killing it in this, you know, and it's true. It seems like it would be much easier to get people because it's just on Zoom, but it's still not as easy as you'd think. Like, there are people who are busy and they have to block out part of their day, and their press team has to say okay to it. So I think a big part of it was getting Dr. Fauci right in the beginning. And he came to us and wanted to talk to Trevor because he knew our audience was young, diverse, and they weren't hearing the message about, he picked Trevor out and a few other people, I think Steph Curry and a few other people that he wanted to talk to make sure that the word got out about the virus. So we were thrilled, but I do think it was a great interview, and I think it gave us a lot of clout with people that wanted to come on to not only, you know, talk about what they're doing in quarantine or whatever, but really talk about hefty, important things. And I would say we also have, you know, since Trevor took over the show, we've been really conscious of making sure to book authors and activists and actors and actresses that are not getting spots on other late night shows, you know, and making sure like we're really inclusive on our guest lineup. And I think that in the wake of what's happening, these are voices now that people want to hear from, which is really nice and great that people now, you know, but we've had relationships with a lot of these people and they've been on the show before. So so a lot of our guest interviews during the pandemic are people that we're really interested in amplifying their voice, getting their message out there, but also like continuing a conversation that we've been having with them for the last few years. One
thing that's also been cool with guest interviews is how we do 2 guests now sometimes. And that's like, there's also like other talk shows have those couches, you know, that kind of thing. And we don't have a couch in that way, but it's sometimes cool to speak to somebody who's liked,
yeah,
you know, who's like an activist kind of, like it's a diverse show.
Yeah, we make sure that like if we're booking like, you know, if we're booking somebody who's there to, you know, promote the new season of their TV show, we're also going to book an author who's writing about the administration or something. You know, like we're balancing it.
That sort of talks to how Trevor's taken the show and the extension, talking about doing a bit more international news and focusing on stories outside of just the US, right?
Yeah, he's definitely the fact that like we're looking at the entire world now for stories, and especially now that this pandemic is a global pandemic, is, you know, it fits into Trevor's natural instinct to want to talk about how, you know, the world is important to it should be important to Americans, and as Americans we should know about what's going on in the world, and I think that having Trevor, who's naturally inclined to that perspective, has been really good in this era. Just, you know, not even as a person who makes a show, even just someone who, like, you know, watches the show, I learn more about what's going on outside the United States than I would from like news media I would consume in the United States.
It's been cool like now because how the audience is, like, let's say Trevor's interested in something happening in Guam. And so there would be like previously, just a short while ago, they'd be like, why are you talking about Guam? And now, like, why aren't you talking about Guam?
Guam has become the focus, has it, during the
yes.
They're a big part of our audience. It's a huge part of our demo.
Yeah, 90% of all our merch sales go through Guam too, so it's very important.
I'd look into that, but
yeah.
Chris McCarthy recently revealed that you're going to go to an hour before the end of the year, so you're doubling within the space. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you give an idea what that extension will mean for the show?
Yeah, I think 45 was pretty easy for us to do, and I think it's probably a programming nightmare, you know. So an
I
hour.
imagine the last 15 minutes will rerun The Office, probably just a tightened
Yeah, but then
version
you
of The
cut
Office.
off half an episode. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I think it made sense to go to an hour because 45 didn't feel like we were trying, you know, like it was so much more of a lift. I think an hour will be, but the big push when we can do it will be to really make sure that the correspondent, like right now we try and get the correspondence on every night, but not, it doesn't always necessarily work out depending on if we have two guests or if there's like a really big headline that breaks and we bump a field piece. But I think a lot of the push is to also get the correspondents on every night because they're so, our fans really love them and are always looking for them, and their interactions with Trevor and their interactions with each other are really fun. So I think the extra time will allow us to play with what more we could do with them.
Joking about boats aside, have you figured out when or how or if you'll actually be able to get back to the studio one day?
You know, we're continuously working with the Viacom CBS task force and talking internally about what we feel is safe and smart to do. And we're always looking to go back, but we haven't quite felt like we're ready to do that yet. The shows, they're doing well from home, and you know, God forbid somebody on the staff got sick or we're spreading it more. I just don't think any of us are comfortable with that yet.
Any confidence in the fact that Stephen Colbert's going back next week and Jimmy Fallon's back? I guess the community going back gives you some sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think everybody has to do what's good for them and make their decisions for their staff and their you know, their host and how the show feels, and you know, maybe they feel more comfortable in a studio. But for us right now, we actually have been really great always about not competing or taking the lead from another show. We're like, we're on cable, nobody's looking at us, you know, like we're just like this like homemade show. So so that has been really nice, and Viacom's been great about just letting us make our own decision. And the plan is eventually to go back. We want to go back, but we don't want to, you know, you confuse the audience also if you go back and then somebody gets sick and then you have to quarantine for another 2 weeks. It's like, it can be very, it's also like changing the process again, you know, until we're sure that we feel good about going back. I think we're going to try and keep doing it like this.
And then final question, the real reason we're here, Emmy nominations. You guys got 6 this time, which was the record under.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about directing, short form? It's all in there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like it's the most nominations we've ever gotten with since Trevor took over, and it's actually just tying the most we ever got with John. So it really is like, what it says to me is that people are watching the show and really liking it, and that is the best part about it. And of course we like love that the writers are getting recognized and that the editors are being recognized, director, you know, so it really is, it's so nice to be recognized like that. But I mean, the show being up in general is great, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's great.
We're very lucky. We feel we're very grateful and humbled by that recognition.
Yeah.
And also, in a year that is where people need a little bit of extra, not recognition, but you know, it's very nice this year where
it's great for morale for our staff to feel like what they're, you know, it's harder to do this than to do it together in a studio. So it's nice that everybody feel, you know, it's good for morale to feel like people are watching, it's resonating. So yeah, that's the best part about the nominations is just that it kind of is like a spirit lift for everybody.
And you're finally found that you're plotting to take down John in the main category.
Oh God.
I mean, not in any public way, certainly. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. Oliver's got a lock on it, but
yeah,
it would be a great thing. But we're just like Kabuka was saying, it just really is great for the staff to feel like the work they're putting in is being, you know, people appreciate it and like it.
Very much.
Well, look, congrats on the nominations, guys. Lovely to talk to you today. So thank you for joining us.
You too.
Thank
you very much. Thank you for having us.